Hello, this is Archimedes, and this geometry lesson is on how to show that lines are parallel. So this goes, it's kind of a vice versa lesson with given that the lines are parallel, then all those corresponding angles would be equal, the alternate interior angles are equal, the alternate exterior angles are equal, and what's the other one? Oh, consecutive interior angles are supplementary. So here, if any of those things are true, then the lines are also parallel. So if the alternate interiors, like here, if 3 and 2 would be equal, or 1 and 4 would be equal, then those lines would be parallel. Okay, but this board problem says given that the lines are parallel, describe two methods you can show that angles 1 and angle 2 are congruent to each other. Okay, well, since these lines are parallel, I can just say this, and I didn't type this out, you guys, and it would take too long in this video to do that because I have to go get the angle symbol and everything. But you can write down angle 1 is congruent to angle 4 because alternate exterior angles are congruent. Because you have two parallel lines, they form equal alternate exterior angles. So there's one way. Here's the other way, you guys. And there's even another way. I was just thinking right before I started this video. Since the lines are parallel, angles 1 and 3 are congruent because they are called corresponding angles. Okay, now this is just one way. There's another way to do this if you want. Okay, then you can say angles 3 and angle 4 are congruent because those guys are called vertical angles, and vertical angles are congruent. Then you can say 1 is congruent to 4 because look, we have 1 congruent to 3, and then 3 is congruent to 4, and it kind of follows this Z pattern right here, and if it follows the Z pattern, it's called the transitive property. Okay, so transitive property. Some teachers, and it depends on what kind of mood I'm in, would let you go ahead and say substitution on this one, but this one is a transitive property. Transitive has to go in this Z sort of thing. All right, let's go. Okay, I'm going to skip that. We don't need that. That's for my class in class. Okay, showing that lines are parallel. Okay, so find the values of x that makes the lines parallel. Okay, because those are corresponding angles, then we say that those angles are equal to each other. So 3x plus 5 equals 65, and then subtract 5, you get 60, and divide by 3, you get 20. Okay, this one here, is there enough information in the diagram to conclude that they are parallel to each other? Well, let's see. If that's 105, because of that straight line right there, straight lines are 180, so 105 plus 75 equals 180. And since those two 75s are corresponding angles, then yes, those lines are parallel because corresponding angles are congruent. All right. Okay, so error analysis. So the student concludes that lines A and B are parallel. Well, what their mistake is they're thinking that these are vertical angles. Well, these are vertical angles, and vertical angles are congruent to each other, and these vertical angles are congruent to each other, but it doesn't mean the lines are parallel. We would need to show that, whoops, I don't know if you can see that here. Let's see if I can squeeze that over just a little bit. No, I can do this, though. We would need to show that x is congruent to y, because if x is congruent to y, then we can either say the alternate interior angles are congruent, or you can say that the corresponding angles are congruent. So this down here says corresponding angles are congruent. Okay, there's the corresponding angles. All right. All right, so find the values of x that makes m parallel to m. Okay, now remember from the last lesson, the one right before this, section 3.2, I think it was, um, um, I told you a little trick. If they look like they're congruent, then they're congruent. If they don't look like they're congruent, then they're supplementary. And this is an obtuse angle. This is an obtuse angle. They definitely are congruent. So you're going to say 3x equals 120, so x equals 40. All right? Okay, here's this one right here. Okay, now this is an obtuse angle. Down here is an acute angle. So they're definitely not congruent, so they have to be supplementary. So add them up to be 180. All right, combine like terms, and you get x equals 15. All right, number 3, okay, these angles right here, this is an obtuse angle right here, and then over here, this 3x is an obtuse angle, so they're congruent to each other, you guys. So 3x equals 2x plus 20, so x equals 20 when you subtract 2x on both sides, okay? Don't they look like they're congruent, you guys? And if they look like they're congruent, to make them parallel, then you set them make equal to each other. Oops, and that's it, you guys, okay?